The summer I dropped acid with my father. A deleted scene and what I had to let go. Dear readers, while I'm on vacation, I thought I'd take the next few weeks to share several of my favorite deleted scenes from my 2021 memoir, The Burning Light of Two Stars. I spent months crafting these scenes and held on to them till the bitter end. I tried my best to shoehorn them into my memoir, but ultimately I had to face the difficult reality that they didn't fit the arc of my story. These scenes, beloved as they were, made the book drag. Sad as I was to cut them, they had to go. The first deleted scene focuses on my relationship with my father. I included more about him in earlier drafts of The Burning Light of Two Stars. But in the final analysis, the book was too long, and I needed to create more momentum. So everything that wasn't absolutely essential to my core story, the 57-year relationship between me and my mother, had to go. For many drafts, I held on to this particular scene because I've always loved it. But eventually I had to, as they say in the trade, kill my babies and let go of all the scenes, sentences, and words the book could live without. The events I describe below took place in June of 1980, a pivotal time in my relationship with my father, who left our suburban New Jersey home to drop out, move to California, and become a hippie in California, 9 years before this scene took place. The story references my birth. I had an identical twin sister, Vicky, who died 24 hours after we were born. We were preemies. I weighed 2 pounds, 12 ounces, and she was the smaller twin. After Vicky died, I spent the first 6 weeks of my life, untouched and never held, in a special incubator called an isolette, mentioned in this piece. The trip. A month before my 24th birthday, my father and I made plans to spend a weekend together at Homeland, my cousin Miriam and James's place in the Santa Cruz Mountains, for their annual Back to the Land party. Dad drove down from San Francisco and picked me up in Santa Cruz, and the two of us headed deep into the mountains. We drove up a dusty, rutted dirt road full of crazy turns and drop-offs, the gears whining as Dad downshifted to keep from skidding in the dirt. When we reached the end of the road, Dad backed onto a dusty shoulder, and we hoisted our backpacks. It was a steep 1/3 mile hike straight up the trail to Up Top. As we crested the final hill, we were both panting. Miriam greeted us, long hair flowing, wearing a floor-length cotton skirt of many colors, waiting to water the guests. She hugged us and handed us each a tall glass of water. Miriam introduced us to the other guests and led us to a bunch of rusty metal chairs perched at the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley. I gazed at the vast green forest below. An owl hooted and another answered the call. Some guy I'd never seen before lit a joint with a magnifying glass, holding it up to catch the sun. His hand was steady, and it took a few minutes, but the doobie caught fire. He took a long toke and passed it to Dad. He took a drag and passed it to me. Dad picked up a guitar. Soon he was singing The Titanic, and I tapped out the beat on the weathered arm of the chair. Stared out into the wild. The owl hooted again. Dad was singing the third verse of The Gray Goose when some other guy I'd never met before came by and offered us some acid. I knew my father liked psychedelics. I'd dropped acid a dozen times with friends, never with Dad. Dad said yes and opened his mouth to whatever the next 12 hours would bring. Then the guy held out a tab to me. I considered it, a tiny square of possibility in the palm of his hand. Why not? I slid the tab under my tongue. I hiked around Homeland for the first hour, waiting for the trip to begin. At first, I felt a gentle spinning sensation. The greens became more vibrant. Trees started pulsing, a soft song emanating from their branches, embracing me. Leaves tinkled like bells. I fell into their rhythm, but then they got louder. Soon they were shouting. An inferno of fierce sensations ricocheted through my body, and I couldn't get them to stop. Everything was repeating and loud, and the pattern grew ugly. The world was ugly. I was ugly and alone. I'd been alone in that isolette, and now I always would be. That loneliness grew inside me and filled my entire being. I couldn't stop it. Skin no longer contained me. I was unraveling. I reached for my sister and for a brief moment felt her comforting heartbeat across the veil, something I'd craved for so long. But then she was gone. A crow cawed. Death was near. I desperately wanted to come down, but I was still going up. I needed help, but I couldn't move. Just get me through this. I promise I'll never take acid again. I followed my breath for hours. In, out, in, out. Finally, the trees quieted until only the wind was singing. The rhythm stilled. My skin held my molecules in place. By the time the ground felt solid beneath me, the sun had transited the sky. I stood. On the dirt path, I heard voices, real ones. The thwack of a knife cutting watermelon. The crow cawed again, but this time its call blended naturally into the rhythm of the living, breathing world around me. I was part of that world. I was going to be okay. I found Dad alone in the teepee, staring into the woods. The distant chords of a guitar and two voices singing harmony wafted through the trees. The music was sweet, pulsing with a yellow glow. I was still high around the edges, but my core had returned. Thoughts moved in a line again. Dad was humming, as usual, but his hum was soaring. No canvas draped the teepee poles that day, just 8 carved tree trunks converging toward heaven. Cool white ash filled the central fire pit. A few mats lay scattered around the outside rim. Dad was perched cross-legged on one, wearing his smooth-bottom moccasins, a pair of faded jeans, and his original Woodstock t-shirt. Small animals scurried through the brush. I plunked down in front of him, crossing my legs in the dust. The pulsing in my chest quieted as I stared into his familiar face. His pale blue eyes fixed on mine, his pupils huge. His sing-song voice rolled over me like a light patter of summer rain. You are so beautiful. I'm so happy to have you as a daughter. Do you know how lucky I am? Yeah, I love you too. But then something jagged ripped inside me. A tear in the fabric that kept everything in place. The truth pressed up and threatened to spill out. I could no longer contain it. I thought, yeah, Dad, you know, you are lucky. You have a daughter who has never held you accountable. I never stopped worshiping you, even after you walked out on me. I spent my teenage years bragging about having a hippie father to visit out in California. Jesus. Yeah, I know how lucky you are. The scolding call of a hawk echoed above us. The sound reverberated, pressing into my chest like a flame. Why had I never held Dad accountable? He beamed at me, face wide open. I love you so much, Laura. I know you do, but I need to tell you some things. Why hadn't I ever said them? Why wasn't I saying them now? The answer rose in my chest, because I couldn't risk alienating the one parent who had always believed in me. I slipped off my flip-flops and scuffed my feet in the dusty soil. The truth ignited inside me. Words pressed up from a bottomless place I didn't know. This was their time. Dad, I've been mad at you for a long time. Your leaving really hurt me. I was 14 years old at sleepaway camp, and you told me in a fucking letter. As I spoke, a chasm opened inside me. I tried to jam it shut, but the opening tore wider. I had never cried, not once after Dad left me. I soldered myself shut, but now my fortress was cracking. I was risking everything. Dad's face flushed with concern. He moved closer. His calloused palms wiped the tears from my cheeks. The trail of his touch lingered long after his hands left my face. It had taken years for me to admit that I was outraged at my father. I'd locked that anger up inside me just like everything else. But now we were tripping together, and Dad was listening. He wanted to hear what I had to say. I just had to find the courage to say it. Dad, you disappeared. You left a huge mess behind. Paul was gone. You were gone. You left me alone with Mom. You know how she is. How could you? That was it. Bingo. It wasn't that he'd escaped to Big Sur to find himself. It wasn't that he gallivanted around with his hippie friends. It wasn't the divorce. It was that he'd stopped being my buffer. Dad listened. His pale blue eyes peered deep into mine. The scar on his nose where he'd been whacked with a board while stocking shelves at his father's hardware store pulsed. I breathed into my belly. Laughter from the nearby guests dappled the waning sunlight. I was still coming down. The distant sounds of a guitar drifted over us. Goosebumps stippled my skin. I scooted closer. Dad took my hands in his. They were big and warm, just like I remembered. The hands that had carried me. Hands that had cut silk screens and carved woodcuts. Hands that loved to play the congas. He held my hands and listened. I said everything I needed to say, everything I'd never said before. Your freedom cost me, and it's still costing me. Dad's eyes filled like a mountain stream. Unshed tears pressed beneath the surface of his words. I'm so sorry, Laura. I just couldn't come back to New Jersey. That life was over for me, and you were the one who paid the price. I never meant to hurt you. No one had ever apologized to me before. In our family, there were only radiating fingers of blame. Our eyes caught for a long moment. The father I could trust looked back at me. I breathed his apology into that ripped-up place inside me. My jagged edges began to soften, like petals floating to the ground. Dad wrapped his arm around my shoulder. I leaned into his chest and my ragged breaths eased. Leaves rattled above us, like cellophane coming off a gift. Maybe it was the acid that gave me courage to speak, or maybe it was just time. Whatever it was, I took my father's apology all the way down to my bones. My anger drained into the earth until all that was left was love. And it stayed that way. It didn't change when I came down. It didn't change in the years to come. I swallowed my father's apology whole, and it took root inside me. That was the day I forgave him. And if you liked this story about my father, the story about my mother is even better. And that's in The Burning Light of Two Stars. And this is some praise for that book, published in 2021. Caregiving an elderly parent, especially against the backdrop of a difficult shared past, can be a bruising spiritual ordeal. We who must travel this territory don't need any more sentimental narratives about it. What we do need is the healing medicine of truth-telling, and Laura Davis brilliantly and generously gives it to us. I literally could not put this book down. That's Katie Butler, best-selling author of Knocking on Heaven's Door and The Art of Dying Well. And this is from Olivia Bethia in Atlanta, Georgia. I found The Burning Light of Two Stars to be riveting, an effortless read. I'm in 2 book groups, and at any given time I am reading or listening to 2 or 3 books concurrently. I put them all down for this one. It's just that good. This comes from Carolyn Bridget Flynn, author of Communion, and editor of Sisters Singing and Sacred Stone, Sacred Water. From the opening moment when Laura Davis is called to life by her mother, to their braided, sometimes twisted, often beautiful, long life together, The Burning Light of Two Stars takes us on a journey of 2 unforgettable, larger-than-life characters. We are pulled into their story and their struggles, and read on to know if they will find it within themselves to make peace together. A tour de force of indelible scenes woven together in an innovative structure. It seemed to me that the pages literally turned themselves. Laura Davis's first book in 19 years is a major publishing event, not to be missed. And this from Jennifer Meyer, from Eugene, Oregon. I've read nonstop since I woke up, almost 100 pages already. It's riveting and exquisitely crafted. If I didn't have things I had to do today, I would finish it in one sitting. And I will put information about how to order the book, either in print, ebook, or audiobook, in the show notes. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. I'll be bringing another deleted scene from The Burning Light of Two Stars to share with you then. Have a good week.